Believe it or not, even though that we're actually banning people from traveling all over the world, we are, canceling any public gatherings, outlawing them for that matter. In the last week, with all of those economic sanctions or governmental sanctions and restrictions in place across the country, people are going crazy buying real estate. And a lot of that has to do with the increased buyer demand that has come forward through this coronavirus as a result of this coronavirus. Hi, my name is Brian Icenhower, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about the coronavirus and how that impacts the real estate industry and the real estate market. I have the privilege of owning one of the largest real estate coaching and consulting companies in North America. We have coaches across the continent and over 500 coaching clients, many of whom are the highest producing agents and teams and brokerages in their respective areas, if not their countries. And because of that, we, over the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there's been this increasing awareness and fear of the coronavirus and what impact that will have on the real estate industry, especially as we are now practicing isolationism. We're not getting together in large groups. We're banning travel and the impact that's having on the economy. How will that leak over into real estate? And what is that going to do to the real estate industry, and how will it impact it? And what's interesting is there's so much thought here. I'm not in any way a biologist or a doctor or a medical researcher, so I'm going to really limit this conversation to the impact on the real estate industry. I do think it's a very serious threat. I do think we need to wash our hands. I do think we need to, be careful and cautious and try to isolate as much as possible. At the same time, I do think we need to be very calm, especially as it impacts business in the real estate industry. Believe it or not, I do not think this will have a negative impact. It may have some small isolated negative impacts, but from a general scheme of things, history tells us that actually a pandemic like this or a major catastrophic impact like this generally actually bodes well for the real estate market and the real estate industry as a whole. Understand that there are two very important economic factors that pretty much control real estate markets, and that's supply and demand. That's kind of the underlying cardinal rule of real estate is if we have too much inventory or supply of housing and not enough demand, prices or values, housing values that is, will go down. And that doesn't happen very often in real estate, but it has occurred, especially in the 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10 recession, the most recent recession. And it really hasn't, a significant one has not really occurred all the way back to the Great Depression of the 1930s. There's been little blips here and there that are very temporary, but it really hasn't occurred. And I want to show you a little bit about what that looks like really quick so that we get some good context on this. So I'm going to turn my screen around and show you a map. These are housing values as reported by the United States Bureau of the Census. So we're talking about the United States here, which is a pretty good barometer, going all the way back to pre-1960, and you can see housing values have always steadily gone up. And there has been a little dip, like I do remember this little dip in 1989, 1990, but it was very short, less than a year. And then otherwise, it's just been kind of a steady upswing all the way up until the 2006-7, where prices peaked out. And then we went into a kind of a free-for-all all the way into 2008, where we saw a recession. And these shaded areas in gray actually represent U.S. recessions. And you can see here that we've actually never had a recession impact real estate values. It's actually been vice versa. So when the stock market goes down and the Dow Jones Industrial goes down, believe it or not, that's never had a negative impact on housing values. Now, vice versa is true. You've seen, like right here in 1989, when housing values went down. I don't know if for those of you that are willing to date themselves, this had to do with the junk bond crisis way back, and housing values escalated tremendously, then dropped a little bit, and we got a recession out of it. Now, very, very recently would be the 2006 recession here. In 2006, we had housing prices go up. In 2006, they hit their peak. We had a lot of housing inventory, a tremendous amount of housing inventory. And then 2007, prices started to drop because supply was way far ahead of buyer demand. And then ultimately in 2008, We hit a rock bottom. Understand, and the market turned around, and we sent the country into a recession because housing values dropped. And the same thing is pretty much true in the 1930s with the Great Depression. Housing values dropped, banks closed, banks dropped, investors ran, and then a recession ensued. But not vice versa. Very rarely, in fact, never in history have we ever seen a recession in the stock market occur that actually leaked into real estate and negatively impacted housing values. In fact, almost nothing impacts housing values. You can see by that chart. I'll put it up there again. You can see that it's just been a straight line since 1960 of up momentum. And the only time we ever got a real significant impact was here in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, until that swing. And that, other than the Great Depression, this is really the only time where it's happened. And even then, it was pretty short-lived. People that were panicking in 2008 and 9, all they had to do was wait a couple years and they got all their values back. Prior to that, it's been nothing but an upswing all the way through. And even since then, it's been nothing but an upswing all the way to 2020. So understand that. There's a lot of security in real estate. So what happens is the real estate industry's biggest competitor is actually the stock market. Okay, they compete. They're not supposed to work interchangeably. So it's not like one goes down and the other goes down as a result, at least when it starts with real estate and when it starts with the stock market. So what happens typically is when the stock market has troubles, investors flee the stock market into real estate, which increases buyer demand and drives values up. And that's always happened. A great example of that, we'll go back to 9/11. That was September of 2001, where the Twin Towers in New York City were attacked by a terrorist attack. And at the time, and that was in September, at the time it was a catastrophe. I mean, there were limits on traveling. People were wondering if they were going to be able to travel again, increased security measures. The travel industry took a huge hit at that point in time, and that leaked into a lot of other industries like we're seeing now too. So much it frightened the Federal Reserve of the United States of America. And the United States Federal Reserve in October of 2001 slashed rates. I mean, rates slashed, and they continued to slash actually, and went down to historic lows. Actually, at the time, we'd never seen mortgage interest rates or the Federal Reserve rates down there in the fives. And boy, did they get down there in a hurry and set new records. And what ended up happening at that time is it really started to stimulate the economy. Then if we move forward, a couple months, October of 2001, November, December, and then we're into January of 2002. What happened in January of 2002? Well, we'll show you again. January of 2002 was the start of what we now call the Great Housing Boom. And that's when, 2002, 3, 4, and 5, where we saw one of the fastest and steepest spikes in real estate values ever. And a lot of that, if not all of that, was pushed due to the Fed Reserve getting involved and stimulating the economy to help protect the stock market. Nowadays, we're seeing the exact same thing with promises of much more to come. We're seeing interest rates at record lows that we've never seen before, with promise to go even lower. The Fed Reserve is talking about taking those interest rates all the way down to zero just to ensure that the economy stays strong. We have a president and administration that is very pro-business focused, that has said numerous times that they will do whatever it takes to keep the economy going. We've seen that in history too. I mean, if we go all the way back to 2007, 8, 9 with economic stimulus packages and bailouts consistently to keep stocks alive, to keep economic stimulus going up, all that does is help real estate in a huge way. So it's very, very important for us to understand. We've got a lot going for us into real estate as people move out. Now, quickly how that works, I'm going to keep it very, very basic, but with regards to how the mortgage rate works, again, it's not set by the Federal Reserve Board. However, they do run very close. Mortgage interest rates, when people get out of the stock market and get out of stocks, they tend to gravitate towards safety, right? And that's either directly into real estate or treasury bonds. The 10-year treasury bill is considered the barometer of safety. If you're nervous about the stock market, that means the economy's going bad. They jump into the 10-year T-bill, treasury bond. And that's why the mortgage interest rate is tied to an algorithm that's most severely impacted by the 10-year T-bill. We have seen a lot of people come out of the stock market, go into T-bills, and that's what's driving the mortgage interest rate down so sharply right now, is because people are fleeing to safety. Real estate is considered safe. And that's why when you look at that chart over and over again, if you look back past, the Great Recession of the late 200, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you can see it's been nothing but safe, gradual appreciation over time, going all the way back to the Great Depression, which is actually before interest rates. One of the reasons the federal government put interest rates in place was to be able to monitor the economy like they're doing right now to keep it stable. So there was no federal interest rate back in the Great Depression, and things went a little bit crazy, and people ran the banks. And that's what has happened. That's the big difference between the recession of 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10, because I think that's what's fueling all the fear. We haven't seen that, in almost 100 years, and we just have it recently. And so everybody's worried we're going to go back into that. And there's big differences between now and then. Number one, we have so much economic production by our federal government. They're good at it. They're good at stimulating the economy quickly, and they can drive a lot of interest. Number two, when we went into, in 2006 and 7, we had outrageous housing supply. I mean, we had well more houses. We had national builders all over the place. Every town across America had an excess of builders that we just do not have anymore, not in 2020. A lot of those builders have gone away forever. Most of the building and growth and supply has been gobbled up. And actually, when this coronavirus is hitting right now, we have the lowest housing inventory in the history of the United States as far as we go back measurably. In some areas, we have less than a month of housing inventory, 2 months of housing inventory. That means if there was no new houses that came up for sale, all of the existing inventory would be sold within a month, and we'd be out of homes. There'd be no supply. Now, they say that prices will start to actually pull back and level out or go down when there's 6 months of housing inventory. We haven't seen that 6, 7 years. It's been, all the way back since 2011 and 12, we've seen 6 months of housing inventory. In fact, our inventory's gradually been going down over the past 8 years, down to what is absolutely nothing. We have something close to a housing crisis where we don't have enough houses for people to live in anymore. So we have a shortage of shelter for people in the United States of America. So believe it or not, we have a perfect storm where mortgage interest rates have been dropped down to historic lows, to heightened buyer demand, to the highest level ever before, and we have the lowest housing supply ever before in history as well too. So we've actually seen an economic market that is poised to go up in price greater than any other time in history, and it is. Believe it or not, even though that we're actually banning people from traveling all over the world, we are, canceling any public gatherings, outlawing them for that matter. In the last week, with all of those economic sanctions or governmental sanctions and restrictions in place, across the country, people are going crazy buying real estate. Most of our clients that we talk to, they're getting multiple offers, 7, 8, 9 offers on properties across the country right now. There's a feeding frenzy. My wife practices real estate, and she's busy every night and every weekend with offers coming on their properties. So a lot of our clients are selling more real estate than they have sold in years. And a lot of that has to do with the increased buyer demand that has come forward through this coronavirus as a result of this coronavirus. So believe it or not, real estate's a very safe play, and we as real estate agents, or people in the real estate industry at least, need to get the word out to people that there is hope and stop the chaos and the fear that permeates the world right now, because real estate's a great economic play. If you're in real estate, we can succeed. So please understand, we need to, it is very important that we focus and try to really place importance on what our clients need right now. Our clients actually need to purchase real estate. They need to move. They need to invest, and they want to at a very high level. And our focus can be there. Now, we need to do it safely and responsibly, right? We need to try to stay away from large gatherings. We need to wash our hands. We need to get tested and make sure that we don't have the virus as well too. But at the same time, we can stay very productive. I mean, a lot of real estate is sold from home, and it's sold everywhere else, and it's being done. It is getting sold in spite of this pandemic right now. So it's important we stay calm. and we have a lot to do and a lot to stay focused. We need to get the word out as people in the real estate industry and kind of keep this economy moving right now. Much like real estate agents and brokers were the soldiers on the ground that helped dig America out of the housing crisis in 2007, 8, 9, and 10 by quickly helping people with their loan modifications and short selling property to get bad loans off banks' books so we could dig our way out and the banks could dig their way out. Well, real estate agents and brokers were kind of the unsung heroes with their feet on the ground, moving these transactions out away from the banks, clearing up the toxic transactions. The same is true now. America needs hope. People are very afraid from a financial aspect about certain industries. And however, we are going to see a lot of buyer demand hit the market due to these low interest rates. Now, yes, there will be instances where there will be certain economic sectors and industries where people do lose their jobs, or there is fear and they don't want to invest in real estate because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their job. They're afraid they're not going to have money. There's a lot of fear out there. And that's our job, is to kind of, as professionals, to get out there and dispel that fear, and help people understand how the economy works and how the real estate market works, and let them know that, hey, the real estate industry has never in history been negatively impacted by an economic recession that originated out of the stock market. Okay, now vice versa, we've impacted twice, right? So we've had real estate values go down, like I told you earlier, and then we've experienced a national recession, and that happened recently in the Great Recession of 2008, and then all the way back to the Great Depression. Only two examples, though, and those two examples started in real estate. They didn't start in other sectors and move into real estate. In this scenario, real estate's bound to get hot. Investors, that's why you're hearing hedge funds, that's why you're hearing real estate investment trusts, moving a lot of their holdings in the stock market out and putting them into real estate at an increased level, because these experts and these pros believe that real estate is the safe bet where everybody's going to flee to, and it's going to drive those prices up higher and higher and higher and higher, especially since we have absolutely no supply whatsoever. So it's important we get the word out. It's important that we keep moving and we dispel the fear out there. Encourage people to be cautious, encourage them to be calm, but let's try to alleviate that fear by educating and providing the public with the material information that they need to know to move forward. Understand, we watch supply and demand. We always watch supply and demand. That is the controlling focus. Right now, we have outrageously low supply. I don't know what type of demand. We'd have to have demand reduced tremendously for us to see prices go down and sales to go down. And we're seeing exactly the opposite happen with the way that our economy is being stimulated, and mortgage interest rates are low interest rates are driving investment into real estate. So even though there may be some that are impacted and unable to buy, in all likelihood that'll be far outweighed by the enticement of getting into and that's what we're seeing right now. All of our clients and teams we're trying to actually hire and bring on right now to handle the flow of the demand, because there's actually a lot of intensity around finding homes right now, and it's really happening at the perfect time. Here we are in spring, when real estate market really heats up. And it's when the interest rates are starting to drop. That's another unique aspect of this too. So it's going to create, we're probably going to see housing price increases at a record level in 2020. So, which is really good for everybody's balance statements, right? Because everybody hopefully owns some real estate, or if not, they're thinking about getting into it as quickly as human possible. So remember to watch that supply and demand. Worry less about the other industries and how they impact buyer demand. Worry more about housing supply. That's going to control this thing, and we have it at a very, very low level. And I'll leave you with the story. I went to the University of Southern California a very long time ago, over 25 years ago, and I had a macroeconomics class. And in that macroeconomics class, my professor, I can't remember his name, but he was Czechoslovakian, which is a country that doesn't exist anymore. That'll kind of date me a bit. He was Czechoslovakian. He did not speak any English, but he had just won the Nobel Prize for economics. So USC apparently recruited him and hired him to come be a professor to study at the school. And he actually also, as a part of that, taught our economics class. It was a huge lecture hall. It was kind of a, for me, going into the business school, I had to take macroeconomics. And so there's hundreds of people in there, and we couldn't understand a word he said. I mean, he would give us a syllabus and a sheet of paper so we could kind of glean what he was talking about. But we actually had to meet into little labs where we got in small groups where basically, that was a separate time each week where someone would actually translate what he was saying. Because when we were in the big lecture hall, we could never understand him. Except this one day, so I was sitting in this big lecture hall, and once again, I'm in class and can't really understand a thing. So I'm usually trying to read through the textbook, to try to follow along as best I could. But then he speaks with absolute passion all of a sudden, and I hear him start to yell and scream. And I didn't quite know where it was coming from because I couldn't understand what he was saying in English. But then all of a sudden, he started to speak in English. And it was the only time I ever heard him speak in English. And here's what he said. He said, "Nothing, not even your Christian God, will overcome or trump the power of supply versus demand." So, and then he went right back to speaking Czechoslovakian. And it was kind of a crazy statement, right? I mean, clearly he wasn't a Christian. What he was trying to do, I get what he was trying to do. He was trying to emphasize the power of supply and demand. How, who cares if it's interest rate? If we have low housing supply and high buyer demand, prices are going up, regardless of mortgage rates, regardless of pandemics, regardless of election years, regardless of trouble in a foreign economy. What he was trying to say was focus. He goes, if you have high demand and you have low supply, prices are going to go up, values are going to go up, regardless of any external factors. So keep focused. Don't be distracted by all the crazy things we see in the news. And that really stuck with me, especially how he said it. I mean, it was pretty crazy, but I've never forgotten it. And I have noticed, over the years, I've been in real estate, for a very long time since then, and I've been through the ups and downs in all kinds of markets now. And every time I hear most people saying, well, is this going to drive housing prices? The only time I've seen housing prices go down in any significant measure was when we had too much supply. And nothing else impacted it. 9/11, I remember I thought after 9/11 prices of houses were going to go down. Well, who would have known that it would start the next housing boom? And every single pandemic, we've seen it with SARS, we've seen it with the swine flu, we've seen it with Ebola. Over those times, every single time there's been a major outbreak and major fear. Every single time it negatively impacted the stock market in a very big way, so much so that after each of those pandemics, the federal government then came in and lowered rates to boost the economy. Every single time. Never once did we have a negative impact on the real estate market. Like I told you, 9/11 was, albeit not a pandemic, a very similar national disaster that was a distraction out there. Once again, Fed gets involved at a very high level, and boom, we see a housing boom. The difference is actually we just have no housing supply to go in with. In 2001, we actually had, a pretty mundane, 5-6 month of inventory housing market. There wasn't a lot of building or supply, but there wasn't a whole lot of buyer demand. So we had a lot of supply, about 5-6 months. So it took a while for the feds to get involved and stimulate that, but it still went through the roof. Now the feds are getting involved and we already have a hot market, which just tells me that this real estate market's going to actually go like we haven't seen before. We are going to see prices escalate at a very, very high level. And as the government continues to boost the economy as a result of this pandemic, I see more fleeing. And understand this, guys, as I'll say it again, as real estate professionals, it is our job to keep people calm and inform them about the real estate industry. Okay. Over the coming months, as more and more testing for coronavirus occurs throughout the country, and they're rapidly trying to get as many people tested, we're probably, as everybody's saying, going to see a lot more people testing positive, which is going to increase these death rates. It's going to increase the rate of those infected and the rate of those that are quarantined and isolated. And that's good. As we see those numbers on TV and on social media, it's going to create a lot of fear. Okay, and that's coming with testing. Testing is just going to reveal what a lot of people suspect is already out there. So as that happens, it's going to create a lot more fear. And that fear then can negatively impact the economy. Now, again, they negatively impact the economy. That's when you see the federal government coming in to try to boost the economy, and the real estate industry actually becomes the beneficiary of that, as we're seeing already with a mass hysteria around, buying toilet paper and buying houses. That's what we're seeing right now. It's just people crazily trying to buy houses. So it's important we get the word out. I mean, our sellers need to hear now is probably the best time to sell ever. I mean, literally, especially if you put toilet paper in the house. I mean, they want the toilet paper, they want the house. It's wonderful. So in home buyers, I mean, you buy a house right now. I mean, think of the instant equity you're going to have at the end of this year as housing prices continue to escalate due to the shortage of supply and the increased buyer demand. So it could not be a better time to make moves in real estate, and it's our job to get that out, because a lot of people will look back at a chart like the one I showed you and say, wow, boy, I wish I had a bought right down here, right? If I had just hurried up and bought right there, right before things went through the roof. Or if I had just bought right here before everything skyrocketed. And you know what? I'm trying to tell you, we're at one of those points right now. According to every economic indicator out there and every instance and situation in history before this. And it's our job to get the word out to the public. And I think in doing so gives people hope. And I think in giving people hope, it actually helps calm our society to ease the problems with this pandemic. So once again, those of us in the real estate industry, we as professionals, we're going to be the foot soldiers on the ground that help get our industry and our society through what otherwise is a very scary thing. So again, let's stay positive, let's inform, let's use these talking points to get the word out to the public. All right, thanks guys.